Welcome to the City of Bakersfield Planning Commission meeting. This television broadcast is brought to you by the local cable companies, the County of Kern, and the City of Bakersfield. You can watch the rebroadcast of this meeting Saturday at 7 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. You can download the agenda for this meeting at www.bakersfieldcity.us. Presiding over this evening's meeting, Chair Daniel Cater.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to call to order the September 20th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Cater.
Here.
Commissioner Bell.
Here.
Commissioner Coleman.
Here.
Commissioner Lomas.
Here.
Commissioner Rudnick.
Here.
Commissioner Wade.
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for attending tonight's Planning Commission meeting. This meeting provides an opportunity for public participation in the development process throughout the City of Bakersfield. The Planning Commission considers a wide variety of projects, including subdivisions, zone changes, general plan amendments, and more. When applications are received, the City Planning Division analyzes the request. Staff will present the facts about the project along with their recommendations to the Planning Commission, who will approve the item or make a recommendation as appropriate. Our goal is to carefully consider each project and make a decision that will balance individual rights with public welfare and the general well-being of our community. We will now receive public statements. This time is reserved for anyone wishing to address the Commission on a matter that is not on the consent calendar public hearings portion of the agenda. If you are here on item 5A, this is not the time to speak. Does anyone in the audience wish to address the Commission? If so, please come forward and state your name. Seeing no one, we will move on to consent calendar non-public hearing items. These agenda items typically involve housekeeping or administrative matters that do not require a public hearing. Does any commissioner wish to remove a consent calendar non-public hearing item for separate consideration? Seeing no one, may I have a motion to adopt staff's recommendation on the consent calendar non-public hearing items?
I'll make a recommendation to accept the consent calendar items.
Commissioner Coleman, can I get a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Rudnick. Thank you, Madam Secretary. This is a roll call vote.
Commissioner Cater.
Yes.
Commissioner Bell.
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman.
Yes.
Commissioner Lomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick.
Yes.
Commissioner Wade.
Yes.
Moving along to item 5, consent calendar public hearings. The next agenda section includes public hearing items that are considered routine or non-controversial. These items have been reviewed by staff and are conditioned in accordance with the requirements of the municipal code. The planning director will read each of the items on the consent calendar to ensure the public has an understanding of all items to be considered. If you would like to speak on an item, please come forward after the items are read and ask the item be removed for discussion. If no items are removed by a member of the public or a commissioner, the commission will vote on all items together in one motion without further comment. Planning Director Coyle, will you give the presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. There is only one item on tonight's consent calendar, and that is an ordinance amendment related to recycling. It's a proposed amendment of sections 17.20.40, 17.22.40, 17.24.40, 17.25.40, 17.26.40, 17.28.20, and 17.31.20 of the Bakersfield Municipal Code. That concludes my reading of the items on tonight's consent calendar public hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Coyle. At this time, I will open all the consent calendar public hearing items. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on a consent calendar public hearing item? Seeing no one, is there any commissioner that wishes to remove item 5A for consideration? Seeing no one, at this time, the public hearing on all consent calendar public hearing items 5A is now closed. May I get a motion to adopt staff's recommendation on the consent calendar public hearing item 5A, incorporating all staff memorandum and revised staff recommendations?
I'll move to adopt 5A, including all amendments to all sections.
Commissioner Rudnick, can I get a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Wade. This is a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Cater,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman,
Yes.
Commissioner Lomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade.
Yes.
Okay. We have no public hearings tonight, so we're moving right on to item 7, which is a workshop, 7A, regarding advocacy rules regarding the local tax measure.
And as soon as we get the presentation pulled up here, I'll get started. Well, thank Chair Cater, Commissioners. My name is Richard Iger. You guys have seen me here in the last few months handling Planning Commission meetings. At the request of some of the commissioners, I'm presenting the same presentation that Ms. Gennaro gave to City Council regarding advocating for the ballot measure, or just advocating for anything in general. So the fundamental law is that a public agency or official may not use public resources for campaign activities or materials. The exception is that the Elections Code allows cities to use public resources to draft a ballot measure and for other activities related to the development of the measure, which the city did this year. And the risk of violating the law is lower for activities engaged in prior to a measure being placed on the ballot rather than after. So the important date here was June 20th, 2018. City Council voted to place the tax measure on the November 2018 ballot. And you guys received a presentation from Chris Huot of the City Manager's Office earlier this year on that tax measure. And so once that measure was placed on the ballot, the risk of violating the law changed, and courts placed more scrutiny on the activities of the city and of the public officials, of which you guys are public officials. So public officials, council members, commissioners, us, all employees, we're limited in our ability to advocate when we're performing official duties. So that's what I want to make sure it's clear to everybody, that you can advocate on your own time, but the important part here is whenever we're working either at City Hall or at an official planning commission meeting, you can't advocate. So we also may not use public funds or resources to influence voters or urge passage of a particular measure. However, what we can do, which was what Chris Huot's presentation did, is provide relevant, accurate, impartial, and balanced presentation of facts. The content, however, not the purpose, determines whether a message provides information or advocates. So if you couch it as information only, but you're saying vote yes on this at the end, it would convert from information to advocacy. So what is allowed? So one may take a position on a measure. However, the campaigning must be done on your private time away from City Hall or when not otherwise acting as a planning commissioner. So as long as you guys aren't up here saying, I think everybody should vote yes on a certain measure, you'll be safe. And it's important to separate your official city work from campaign work. So if you're out and about saying, I'm a planning commissioner looking at this project, oh, by the way, vote yes on this, you're probably blurring the line. But if you're at a cocktail party and you're Patrick Wade, you can express your opinions however you want on candidates or different ballot measures. So, and when campaigning, this is the part, be clear that although you are a city official, you are not representing the city. So do not campaign in city facilities or solicit from other city officials or employees. And use your personal, not city resources. It's not as relevant to you guys, you don't have personal city phones or city emails, but that goes for staff. So what is not allowed? To ask people to vote for or support a particular ballot or candidate, to tell people to cast their ballot in a particular manner, to request that somebody vote against something, ask that somebody defeat or reject a particular measure, or sign a petition for or against a particular measure. And remember, this is related back to while you're in your official capacity, not in your private capacity. So more of what is not allowed, this is what public resources include. The big ones, city buildings or other facilities, any device that we would give you, or the time for which the city is paying you. And so we're paying for your time tonight, so that's why I keep harping on, while you're here tonight, don't start advocating and we'll be okay. And so for us, it's when we're on duty, we can't advocate. So, and here's a couple scenarios that we ran through at the city council meeting. So one is city council member, but we'll say planning commissioner member X announces at the city council meeting or planning commission meeting, I would like staff to develop a brochure to send to all residents reminding them to cast their ballots for the measure. So we cannot do this for a couple reasons. Number one, you guys are advocating from the dais. And number two, the advocacy is because you're encouraging people to cast their ballot and you're asking the city to use funds for this particular action. Here's another scenario. Say Planning Commissioner X makes a personal contribution to approve Measure A campaign and attends a party for the campaign. This is fine as long as you're doing this in your personal capacity, not as a planning commissioner. Here's another example. So Planning Commissioner X sends an email from a city account, which like I said is not really related to you guys, but let's say you had access to one that says vote for Measure A. So once again, since you're using our resource, that would violate the rules. You should, but you can, on your personal email address, send something, say, hey, I think Measure N is a good idea, as long as you don't sign it, Planning Commissioner X. So if, like I said, if Measure A is a topic at a neighborhood meeting and people are discussing, they happen to know you're a planning commissioner, as long as you state that you're there as an individual and not as a planning commissioner, you can continue to explain why they should or not support a particular measure. Because remember, you're on your own time and you're distinguishing between the fact that you're a planning commissioner versus you're in your personal life. So do or don'ts. Here's another example on a TV or radio show. If one of you get asked to go on TV and discuss particular measures, which you may, because there's a couple that actually involve planning, not just the tax measure, but there's some marijuana measures on the ballot. So every effort should be made to clarify that your position is from a personal or business perspective, not a planning commissioner's perspective. And so if this may not relate to you guys, but if you're out walking campaigning, just be careful that it's not a good idea unless you're kind of making it clear to the public. It's also very fuzzy if you're campaigning with a city council pin on. So that's why we put the caveat down here, when in doubt, give information only and or speak to our office first. So in summary, you may take a position or support the measure, but only as in your personal life, on your personal time. When acting in an official capacity, you can only provide information, never use city resources to advocate, and the line is always it's not clear and it's going to be tough to decide, and each case will be factually specific. And so that's the end of the show. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. And like I said, if you want to call me any other time, if you have a question, feel free.
Commissioner Wade. Thank you, Mr. Egger.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
On the summary there, it says, when acting in an official capacity, provide information only. So the presentation that I sat through multiple times, and I think many people here did also, there's lots of information there, all of which advocated for a tax increase.
So as long as it's information only and not asking you to vote or specifically telling you to vote, that's what crosses the line, is saying, so this is why you should vote yes on that. And a lot of the information that Mr. Hewitt was providing was also before that June 20th date, which I said the burden is not as high at that time.
Yeah, I know I've seen it since then. Maybe I have my dates wrong. Anyway, so it's okay, as long as all the information, as long as it's just factual, it doesn't matter where those facts lead.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Bell?
So my question has to do, I don't think this is political. So Monday night, for instance, I'll be on a radio program advocating for a safer and secure downtown and some of the dilemmas that we're fighting through because laws have changed, or at least the state has changed laws. As long as I make a statement right off the bat that this is my personal view, in this case, I would be representing either the DBA or DBDC. Do I make a overture to that end? Am I that specific to say this is in representation of them and what, as community concerned citizens, and leave it at that?
I think that would be enough to satisfy this threshold, because as long as you're not saying, I'm also a planning commissioner and this is what I'm doing, you're not going to blur that line.
So leave off other activity and just simply say this is as a concerned citizen and representing the community as best we can. Leave it at that. Okay.
Yep.
I like that.
Commissioner Coleman.
Yes, Mr. Iger. Is there any restrictions on supporting candidates for city or county or state offices?
As long as it's on your own time, no. You can support whoever you choose.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments, I'd just like to say thank you, Mr. Iger. It was very informative and a great refresher moving into the election season. So that wraps up our workshops for the evening. Moving on to communications. Are there any staff communications?
Just one, and that is there will be a planning commission meeting on October 4th at 5:30 p.m. here in council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coyle. Moving on to commissioner comments. Are there any commissioner comments? All right. Commissioner Coleman.
Mr. Coyle, we were just lamenting here that you're working this a lot since you've been here, so.
Actually, I'm hoping this is probably the shortest meeting during my tenure here with the city.
Seeing no other comments, I will adjourn the meeting at 5:47. Thank you. Have a good evening.